Well, hello again. Here we are for another scriptural study. It's entitled, Do You Vote? And do you vote every day? Does the scriptural way reveal a better voting process? Do we actually vote smart? As always in these scriptural studies, please ensure your screen is on full screen to get the full value of the visuals and the scriptural texts being shared. Is this not a very important subject here and now? Canada has just finished their election process and have elected a new prime minister. The US is fully in the swing of things, ramping up their 2016 presidential election. Have you noticed, as an example, in North America, like many other nations, the election process in the US is every 4 years. In Canada, it can be called upon by the parliamentary members at any given time. It is not a daily process. Is there such a thing as a daily process where you would vote every day? And would this be a better process? So before we answer those questions from a scriptural standpoint, let's discuss first the existing election process. Have you ever noticed all of the campaigns in the election process always promise change? So why is this the case? Why didn't the changes promised in the prior election process and its campaign stick? I, for one, have been enjoying lately that there are many people realizing that the more things change, the more they are staying the same. I enjoy this BBC visual that states, Greece is collapsing, Iranians are getting aggressive, and Rome is in disarray. Welcome back to 430 BC. Indeed, the more things change, the more they are indeed staying the same. And there are many waking up, realizing that the promises of value-added change never seem to happen. And the change that does occur is indeed not in the best interests of its citizens in regards to their well-being. Then there are some of us that want real change, not public relations games. Allow me to explain. Have you ever noticed that Gentiles in power govern by compromising with evil? Because they want to receive esteem from one another, but not the Almighty Yahuwah in heaven. What does this mean? Do you notice how politicians get elected? They accommodate requests from people that are not, in reality, good and are healthy for its citizens. Some examples are the legalization of mind-altering substances could be one. We've recently learned the output of the legalization of abortion through Planned Parenthood and the selling of, unbelievable as it sounds, human baby body parts. The list could go on, but I think those two should be self-sufficient enough to share the point that is being shown above. There is another voting process, and that voting process is completed every day. And those in that voting process, that is a daily system, do not compromise with evil. And they walk only in His paths, the Almighty Father Yahuwah, as it states in Psalm chapter 63, verse 1. Are you curious about what this other voting process that is daily is all about? Would you agree it's getting more difficult for the politicians to be elected, let alone be re-elected? Well, why? Well, we live in a generation of me. And it is indeed called the selfie syndrome. And some believe that the social media is making the majority narcissistic. Well, what is narcissism? Narcissistic personality disorder involves a preoccupation with self and how one is perceived by others, Narcissists pursue gratification from vanity and the admiration of their own physical and intellectual attributes. So, as this increases, there are more requests placed on politicians, and as such, these politicians accommodate those requests whether or not they are good for society. The politician's intent is narcissistic as well. They just want to be elected and/or re-elected. Thus, the social games are played. So it begs the following questions. Do corrupt citizens corrupt a nation first? Or does a corrupt government corrupt a nation first? Let's explore this question as well. An individual back in the 1920s by the name of H.L. Mencken attempted to answer that question in the past for future generations. And he stated, quote, "As democracy is perfected, the office of the president represents, more and more closely, the inner soul of the people. On some great and glorious day, the plain folks of the land will reach their heart's desire at last, and the White House will be occupied by a downright fool and complete narcissistic moron." Do you agree with this statement? More importantly, do you see it happening today? Have you ever heard of the saying, if you are always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be? Now think about that for a moment. This is the heart and soul and the difference between people that vote every 4 years, or when Parliament decides you vote, versus the ones that vote daily. Allow me to explain. If you are always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be because you're just trying to seek the esteem of the world and those in it. But the ones that vote daily seek the esteem of Yahuwah every day, and this is how they become more than what they are and more than what the world can ever be. The Messiah explained this very well in the book of Yehukanan, or John chapter 5, verses 43 to 44. Remember, John's original name meant Yahuwah's humble servant. So the Messiah goes on to say, "I've come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, him you would receive." Well, what does that mean? Well, let's go to verse 44. He goes on to say, quote, "How are you able to believe when you are receiving esteem from one another? And the esteem that is from the only Almighty One you do not seek." So back in his day, the politicians were seeking esteem from the citizens of society. The citizens were seeking esteem from each other. But no one was seeking the esteem of the Almighty One, Yahuwah himself, our Father in heaven. So if we're always trying to be normal, how will we ever find out the amazing things that we can actually be, that were predestined from the Almighty Father, Yahuwah himself, from the beginning of time? Remember, the world defines what normal is and asks you to be part of it on any given time. The scriptures are opposite. It demands we become set apart from the world. Read the book of Jacob, chapter 4, verse 4, or the book of James, to find more information on this. And this is the reason why no one accepts the Messiah's name, because he came in his Father's name. And you know what the world does. They think it's normal to call the Father by a title, a substitute at that. We are called to share the name, praise the name, sing to the name, not provide substitutes. Does everyone actually realize that Israel relinquished her high calling to be the spiritual leading nation on this planet and chose to become a secular political one, like all of the Gentile nations? Well, in Scripture, we can read the facts behind this actual truth. In the book of Shemuel, Book 1, chapters 8 through verses 4 and 5, we read the following, quote, "And all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Shemuel at Ramah, and said to him, Look, you are old, like all the nations, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a sovereign to rule us like all the nations." So here we go again, seeking esteem of those in the world and things of the world, not the esteem of the Almighty Father in heaven, Yahuwah himself. Indeed, there is nothing new under the sun. So, is there a better way? Thomas Alva Edison stated, "If there is a way to do it better, find it." So what we're sharing today in this study, we are sharing that you must vote daily. Well, first, before we can do that, we need to understand why. In the book of Isaiah, originally known as Yeshayahu, which meant salvation is of Yahuwah, we read in chapters 55, verses 8 through 9, the following, quote, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares Yahuwah. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." End of quote. So let's dive into how we could vote daily for a better way of life here and now, and possibly for all of eternity. Because what we have today doesn't work. And how many people will actually argue that fact? Here is just one example of the better way. We can find this in the book of Matithyahu, which originally meant gift of Yahuwah, changed to Matthew. Chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. Quote, "This, then, is the way you should pray. Our Father who is in the heavens, let your name be set apart. Let your reign come. Let your desire be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And do not lead us into trial, but deliver us from the wicked one. Because yours is the reign and the power and the esteem forever. Amen." What is this saying? Those that vote daily are voting for another government, a better government. And they're asking the Almighty Yahuwah himself that his reign comes, that his desire is done, and not ours. Because they realize that our desires, if left unchecked, will produce death, chaos, destruction. Is this a smarter way to vote? Some believe firmly yes. So let's explore now why this is a smarter way to vote. The excellent thing about this subject matter is that history is laced with information on the Gentile governing system all throughout human history. And as everyone knows that studies this material, nations, governments, societies starts off in bondage. And for some reason, some, not all, scriptural principles come into play, and a belief system is created, and from that, courage. Thus, from that comes liberty or freedom, and from that, abundance. And unfortunately, sometime in that period of the cycle, selfishness starts to sink in, and then complacency, apathy, dependence. Are you seeing that very same cycle in the election process and discussion points that they have here and now? This is something that can be studied and known for a fact because it happens all through time. Let's find out where. Look at all of these nations. The best that the election process and government systems can do is produce an empire of rising and falling somewhere between 200 to 250 years. Best case scenario. And even within those years, there is strife, chaos, destruction, and even more death. Does our present election process work? It doesn't. It comes and goes. And for anyone to ignore this actual historical fact is delusional. They don't have a love of the truth. This is very important subject matter, and it's not meant to be offensive and or rude to anyone. This is just history. It's like math. 2 plus 2 indeed equals 4. When we realize this, we then can move on and be much more than what we actually are. When we receive the esteem from people in the world, we continually produce the same thing. Let's explore this thought. Here is a visual explaining the repetitive output of man's historical governing process. It's defined as insanity, which means doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We can find something like that in the book of Mishlei, originally meaning truth, which was changed to Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12. Quote, "There is a way which seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death." So on the previous slides, this is what happens when the nations come and go. And at the end of that cycle, we're placed back into bondage. Are you seeing that here and now today? Are we moving to that same portion of the cycle as we move forward? But the world will not let up. Let us all not be naive. Governments and their politicians will seek your esteem, and they will want you to vote. Remember, you have an alternative process. You can vote for a better way every day. Well, let's compare the two alternatives of the campaign promises of world government versus the covenant of Yahuwah. In world governments, there are basically three things that they always sell you on that make you feel better, and they try to attempt to obtain your esteem in these three categories. Number one, better health care. And have you ever noticed that the health care does not improve? It actually gets worse. And some would still argue that, but let me share this. With Yahuwah and his government, as we read in the book of Revelation chapter 21, verse 4, he is planning to provide no more tears, no more sickness, and no more death. We wouldn't even need health care. So are you going to vote every day for this? Or are you going to cross your fingers and hope world governments in time will produce better health care? Number two, they always promise a better economy. Well, let's take a look at Yahuwah and his government. In the book of Psalms, originally known as Tehillim, meaning praises, in chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, it promises prosperity in everything we do. And it can do that because it's based on better principles of finance and fiscal responsibility. It does not believe in debt. Number three, world governments and their politicians during their campaigns promise we will minimize war and create peace. You don't see that happening, do you? But number three, in Yahuwah and his government states in the book of Yeshayahu, meaning Yahuwah is salvation. Now the book is named Isaiah, chapter 2, verse 4. It speaks about the elimination of war. And not only that, no more training for it. That means there are no companies on the planet making weapons. See, Yahuwah and his government deals with the root cause. World governments just deal with symptoms. And they're more worried about your vote as compared to making the world actually better. So please take the time. These are only 3 examples. Read the scriptures. See the governmental promises that Yahuwah has from his very way of living, which can help us here and now today, let alone promise an eternal life as well. Why would we take the voting process literally today that exists in the world versus the alternative of voting for Yahuwah and his way daily? It is obvious the world is not aware that our government system and election process, let alone its education systems, its economic systems, its world religious systems, all originate out of Babylon. We are to come out of Babylon, not rush back into it. We are to be set apart from the world and the Babylonian ways of confusion. Study this further. It would benefit all here and now, let alone the life to come. So as we've seen, if we continue with the Babylonian system and process, it always leads to death and destruction. Let's vote pro-life. Yeshayahu, again, which means salvation is of Yahuwah, was changed to the book of Isaiah, as we read in chapter 35, verses 8 through 10. Quote, "And there shall be a highway and a way, and it shall be called the way of set apartness. The unclean does not pass over it, but it is for those who walk the way, and no fools wander on it. No lion is there, nor any ravenous beast go up on it. It is not found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransomed of Yahuwah shall return and enter Zion with singing, with everlasting joy on their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away." End of quote. Again, it's called the way of set apartness. It's not a world religion or a world government. It's set apart. It's Yahuwah's way. And if you recall in the previous visuals, his name is also set apart. But the world still thinks it's normal not to be set apart. It uses substitute titles for his name, and incorrect names as that. Again, vote pro-life. This is why we share the new moon day calendar with proper Sabbaths and feast days, and we ask others to help us learn it further so that we are in full alignment with Yahuwah and his government, his way of doing things. And besides, as we read in Revelation chapter 11, verse 15, quote, "And the seventh messenger sounded, and there came to be a loud voices in the heavens saying, The reign of this world has become the reign of our Master and of his Messiah, and he shall reign forever and ever." So let's get on with it now. Let's learn what this government process is all about, and how we can vote for it every day and request it to be part of our lives here and now, let alone into the future. So yes, let us vote every day. Let us vote in the name which is above all names and request that his reign comes and that his will be done as it is in heaven. Together as one for a better here and now, let alone a better future. Because if we accept second best, we will very often get it. So vote pro-life. And let's move on from this Babylonian system once and for all. So we do have an alternative and a better way, and this is only one example. Again, Yahuwah doesn't campaign like a politician would for our esteem. It's the other way around. We are looking for his esteem, his way, his desire. At the end of the day, if you still want to argue and accept second best, you can. You have the right to choice with Yahuwah. Yahuwah is not looking for robots. He's looking for willing participants to join this government and its way. If you don't want to be part of his government and or his way of government, he will know, and as such, you will not get to participate. But that is your choice. So let us help each other learn the government of Yahuwah, its ways, for a better life here and now, let alone the life to come. Let's help each other to vote smarter. And let's vote every day, and let this vote be known. So does the scriptural way reveal a better voting process? Indeed it does. We hope these scriptural studies add value to you and your loved ones. Again, we are not teachers. We share the word and ask for critiques with the subject matter so that we can grow further in spirit and truth and in alignment with Yahuwah and his way. We thank you for the privilege and blessing to serve and share in the name which is above all names. And may Yahuwah continue to keep and bless each and every one of you and your loved ones. Thank you again.